Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's episode, we talk to Sarah, who is a producer. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sarah.
So, producer. Now, I know that my son is in some kind of entertainment field as well, and I know the kind of things that he does. I watch plenty of TV, so I certainly see credits roll. I have no idea. What is the pecking order? I see executive producer, producer. I always guess that a lot of these guys have nothing to do with the show other than maybe they threw some money into it. Can you explain to us what a producer does?
So it's a great question because, once again, it's a great point. There's so many levels to producing. Executive producer being, quote unquote, the highest level, but that also can vary in terms of, like you said, people can just throw money at a project and they may not even look at the script, come to set, may not have any involvement aside from financial.
Right.
Or the executive producer is almost similar to a showrunner where they are very involved and they are there every day and they are kind of the highest on the food chain, I suppose. Oftentimes, I get this question a lot because I have like a grandmother, for example, who's like, "What do you do again?" And I'm like, "Grandma, I don't, I'm just at the, I'm with the movies. I'm on set. I'm having fun."
Right.
I like to say that, until you get to that kind of final boss level of executive producer, which you are, in a sense, doing everything. The way that I like to think of a producer, and maybe being biased saying this, is producers really what they do is they kind of take something and make it better. Whether that's logistically, whether that maybe is financially, whether that's creatively speaking. We're there to put out fires. We are there to coordinate almost like any detail. There's really no realm of things that we kind of don't have a hand in when it comes to production, to filming, to pre-production, and all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about a producer with, or a showrunner for that matter, I'm primarily in the banking field. So we have project managers, and they pretty much make sure that certain things run smoothly. That's kind of how I've always pictured it. But again, I know we've got so many different variations of producer. So you're pretty hands-on then? You work with a lot of different people on a production set?
Yeah, and that's a great kind of parallel to it, a project manager, in the more like corporate side of things in terms of myself. And it kind of varies project to project based on budget, based on whether something's union or non-union, non-union shows or productions. Typically, like, I'll be doing everything like you could think of. It's like I'll kind of manage the expectation of like the art requirements of the art department, for example. And it's like, okay, for this, we need X, Y, Z. I may be even one of those people that's like going and helping them set up or going and picking something up that we might need last minute, or that's making sure that production is, has everything that they need with how many people's lunches they might need to get in terms of number. Like it's literally, once again, bigger budget, a union show, for example, there are rules. Like if we're doing a scene and we want to shoot inside a bedroom and there needs to be a wall of jackets, let's say, on a union show, I can't touch or put up any of those things, but I can be involved in like, okay, so hey, this is what we're thinking for this. Our director wants this, and blah, 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 blah. So definitely hands-on and involved in a lot of departments. Bigger shows, sometimes just really involved with the executive producers and the creative, and being in Video Village often and kind of watching things down, and then kind of going back to our meetings and refocusing, etc. So yeah, kind of a hand in everything.
So let me ask you, Sarah, when you talk about budgets, what's the largest budget show you've worked on?
Oh boy, that's a great question.
Or just a guess. I mean, I don't even know if you always know the number.
Yeah, Most recently, I worked on a couple Amazon shows. I don't know an exact number, but like within, 10-15 million dollar budgets, like
Okay.
just really, yeah, like Amazon and that was even more of like an unscripted and or a docuseries that I had worked on. So something that doesn't even require, like a Game of Thrones budget,
Right.
let's say, but like still for even something of that nature, like it's still so much money to throw, it's something that's not even as large of a project, if you will.
No, I can't imagine exactly how much it takes from a coordination point of view. And
Yeah.
also, especially if you happen to have like a union shop,
Right.
you probably can't cross lines anywhere, right? So, if
Yeah.
there's going to be cars involved, we need a driver for everyone or whatever the
Right.
rules are. Um,
Right.
do you have a preference of working on union shop, non-union shop, or does it just depend on the project?
My initial instinct is to be like union, of course, just because there's so much protection in it. B, there are, producers, we don't have a union, but like the camera people, for example, they have a union. So if they go over their 12-hour day, they are getting compensated very well for their time. So it'll be like I think at like after the 12th hour, it's like double the next hour, they get paid double their hourly rate and so on and so forth. As producers, we're on a weekly, essentially. We're staffed.
Yeah.
So I can work 24 hours or I can work 2 hours and I'm making the same amount of money. So I'm never protected in that sense. But if I'm on a union show that is protected by those things, I also benefit from it because we're not going to be on set for 18 hours because it's going to be so costly to the network that they're not going to do that. But then again, when I am working on something maybe with a smaller budget and or non-union, I have so much more creative control as a producer, even though I'm not an executive producer, because it's just a smaller team, right? So we are more hands-on and I'm involved in things that maybe the executive producer would be making those decisions only on a union show. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's hard. It's a give and take with all of it. So I guess it really is project dependent, but it's nice to work on union shows because we're not just getting screwed over with the time sometimes.
Right.
This sounds really fascinating. Was this something that, like a job that you wanted when, as a little girl, you said, I'm going to grow up and be a producer? Or did you just kind of fall into it, or were you in a different line of entertainment and just kind of evolved into this role, or kind of how did you get into this role?
Yeah. No, this isn't something that I didn't grow up necessarily knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I come from, my mother is a very successful businesswoman in Orange County. She actually owns 2 sheet metal contracting companies that are really, really fruitful and is just really like a badass within what she does. I saw this embodiment of just like a powerful career woman. So I knew that I wanted to do something just like independent, I guess, kind of in that way, or very like, I wouldn't normally see a woman in that position or what have you. And so I kind of fell into this, if you will. Bit of a long story, but basically I grew up in Orange County and then I moved out to LA to move in with an ex-boyfriend of mine. And I was about 19, 20 or like 20 years old. And I had been pretty financially independent at that point and moved to LA and I didn't have a job moving up here, which really made me nervous because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I kind of started doing some odd jobs, oftentimes checking Craigslist or like, Facebook ads about jobs and whatnot. And I actually was hired as a personal / executive assistant to this gentleman who owned a really successful weed dispensary in the Valley in like North Hollywood area. And this was right before it was legalized, but you could come in if you had like a medical card. But everything was still very much done in cash. It was all cash transactions because it wasn't legal, so you couldn't take credit cards yet. And it was a very thriving business within its field. And I had to do a myriad of different things, being his personal assistant and his executive assistant. So it was like house duties, groceries, but then also helping out with the business aspect of things. And it was cool, but I was making great money for my age at the time because I was handling so many different things. But it was never, obviously I was like, I don't want to, like, there was no reason for me to really leave. I was like 21 maybe, but I was like, I don't want anything to do with this long term. Like, I don't, this is cool. It makes him a ton of money. It seems like the business is booming and all these things, but like, this is not what interests me at all. So I was kind of lost. And I one day came back from like a really busy day there, and I was on Craigslist and looking for at jobs, and like, Craigslist, is a little weird and like unreliable. One night I'm looking and I see for like a receptionist slash client services position at this post-production studio in Hollywood. And I didn't know anything about post-production at the time. I looked up the company quickly after, and they mostly just did audio services. So it was just an audio, post-production company. And I did a little bit of research, and I was like, let me apply to this. Even though it was just a receptionist position, I was like, I am not qualified for this position really whatsoever. I don't see how they're even going to hire me, but let me just try. You know what I mean?
I was going to say, you sound great going in an interview. I am not your
100%.
person. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, this is just, but also too, I'm definitely one of those people that's kind of like, I'll kill it in the interview. Like I'm going into it knowing that I'm going to be very personal. So I apply and I get a call a couple days later, and they are asking me to come in for an interview. So I go in for the interview, and it goes well. I felt good about it. I saw two girls as I was leaving right after me that were interviewing for the same position. So I was like, the likelihood of this is just really like, and one of the first questions they asked me was like, so like, what's your experience within production and film and television? And I was like, my brain's like, work faster, try to go. I was like, oh, I don't really have any, you know what I mean? I was super honest. And but I had been a receptionist previously in my life, so that kind of helped. And then, long story short, they called me a few days later, and I was hired.
Nice.
I was really excited about it, and the duties were relatively straightforward, aside from the receptionist aspect. But the client services was the most important in terms of my trajectory, because we had a lot of producers and stuff, people coming in for their post sessions, right?
Right.
And I would have to get to know their coffee orders or their lunch orders. We would order them lunch and other specific, they'd be there for maybe like 4 to 5 hours at a time. So it was kind of an all day thing. So they really wanted us to get to know their clients. And they had built quite a clientele over the years. And so it was really important to them to maintain those relationships. And we were kind of the face of that client service. Looking back, realizing that they really just wanted like a cute girl working at the front desk that would remember things like coffee, and that was the extent. But I really took it serious.
Yeah.
And we got to know some of these producers and the way that they took the coffee, and then I got to talking shop with them a little bit, and how their session went and what they do in there, and like XYZ. And the audio engineers were also really great at this place, and so I would pick their brains about so many things. Sometimes I got to watch down them edit in our free time. And like, when I would meet producers, I felt like I was, even whether man, woman, whoever, I felt like I was like talking to myself. It was like very much this like personality. And I just found it so fascinating. And it reminded me of just this strong, powerful business person. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want that. I want that. And so, I was there for about a year and a half. Really not much movement you can do there unless you want to become an audio engineer.
Right.
And, I made friends with some producers, and then, basically one of them came in one day, and I was like, hey, if you ever need a PA on set, please let me know. I really would love to be on set at some point. And he was like, yeah, of course. I'm like, oh, I'll never hear from that guy again. And then a good like 2 months later, he reached out and was like, hey, I've got a project and I need a PA. And that's how it started.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's how all these things happen, right? As long as you get somebody who has a little bit of a motor, and
exactly.
I've always joked, even with my kids, half of it is showing up and doing the job right. That
exactly.
you do that, make yourself to where people know this is who you go to. Then that's what happens. When you say PA, production assistant.
Production assistant is how I got my start. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So, and I just, I just think it's so important whenever you're doing a job. Now, this would be tough for a lot of union jobs because I'm sure they have a lot of rules, but, just make yourself indispensable. Just do whatever needs to be done.
Exactly. And I think, too, when I love to be able to, like, hand down this advice, because this industry, different in other industries in the sense of, like, it's not frowned upon if you ask questions, but their expectation is that you already know. And so the most important thing is to get on set and find your trusted friend, even though you guys don't know each other,
Right.
and use and that's who you don't go to your like, which other industries it's not so much the case. Like other industries, I guess you can go to your boss because they know that you're learning and you're moving your way up. And of course, I don't want to say that's not what I don't ask questions, but it is a different kind of vibe, if you will, that you kind of just need to find someone else that's like you can kind of trust and be like, hey, I just got asked to do XYZ. Like, do you know? And you know what I mean? And then that's kind of how you learn on the fly.
Sure.
Just anticipating, I think, is the biggest thing, regardless of whether you know what you're doing or not. Because I got hired on many sets as a PA having no clue what I was doing. It's just like you said, making yourself available and being like, hey, can I get you? Like, even I would insert myself in places like, and Luke actually was really great at this on set too, is just like if you're standing there and they're shooting and you don't really have anything to do, grab a bunch of waters and just start passing them out. People will remember that. It's such a small gesture, but it's being anticipatory in that sense.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Now, again, how much did Luke pay you to talk well of him?
Yeah.
I hope it wasn't much.
Yeah. No, it's a high number, but we can talk about
okay. All right. Very good.
He actually gave me your money. I don't know.
So then, you started as a production assistant. You kind of move your way up. Then ultimately, you get to the producer level. Now you're in charge. You're the project manager, so to speak. So that's a whole nother level of stress, right? And so I'm sure that there's been times on set when you've probably had to put out some major fires. Was there ever a time where maybe there were like two actors or two staff maybe fighting or arguing, and you kind of had to step in the middle of that? And
yes, when it's not when it's been people like above me. I'm like, I'll stay out of this for sure.
Right.
But I've had like PAs under me, or even like an associate producer, like an AP, which is also the position that I was in just a few years ago. Kind of get in heated debates with like production, for example. I feel like I can oftentimes offer like a buffer, kind of like, okay, because this is, you're working 12-hour days. We're all going to butt heads at a certain point, and I think going into an understanding to not take things personally, and so on and so forth. The only times that I guess I've ever really kind of inserted myself or become a buffer is when it's with someone who's in a position that maybe doesn't have as much experience and maybe taking something more personally and interjecting and being like, okay, guys, and then taking people aside. From my own experience, I have gotten into it with people who are at my level and having to kind of, I guess, be a little more courageous in a workspace and kind of addressing something straightforward. I'm a pretty straightforward person. And the more I move in my career, the more that I'm like, we can't take this personally or else nothing's going to get done and everything's just going to be shitty because we're working really long days together and 6 days a week sometimes that we're filming. And so like, we have to maintain a level of just like you just liking each other. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to be best friends. We have to hang out. You gotta just get along for the time being.
I was just gonna ask. So during any of these conflicts, were any of them just like super petty or just super like, what are you guys even fighting about? You're grown adults here.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's too. Once again, this industry comes with a lot of ego, and so it's little like. I remember being in a like, I guess, a pre-production meeting, if you will. We're in development about something, and one of the associate producers offered just like a counterpoint to what one of the producers was suggesting we do for a certain segment of a show. And it was just like, oh, well, I don't know if it would make as much sense to do this. And that was the associate producer, and the producer was the one who suggested the idea. And I happened to, after that meeting, it was fine. The information was received in the meeting. After that meeting, I'm walking out. The producer pulls the associate producer aside and goes, hey, how old are you again? And the associate producer was younger because it's a lower position. And I think she thought I was out of earshot. And the AP responds and goes like, oh, I'm 20, 26. And she goes, yeah, so I've been doing this a lot longer. And, you can't, there's a little bit of a pecking order here. And that was just really not handled well at all. Mind you, I heard the whole conversation. We were all in the meeting. She wasn't rude. She wasn't like, no, your idea sucks. We should do this. She just offered a counterpoint.
Right.
Now, is there a pecking order in these things? Sure. You kind of learn who's cooler with speaking up and who's not. That's all a learning learning curve, but I had to walk over because I heard the whole thing. And she also was being kind of like, I mean, technically inappropriate because she was asking her age, which has nothing to do with their conversation. And I was like, hey, I think that's being misinterpreted. And I don't think what you're saying to her is fair. And a woman had to step in, and it was super petty, and it was clearly very much just an ego thing. She just hated that someone spoke up in the meeting, and this happens often in this industry, even now, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've actually heard in meetings, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
Oh.
Now, the funny part is it was said to somebody who was in way over their head and didn't know it, and they were adamant that they were right, so that everyone kind of giggled at that one. But yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time. So I have a question for you as well. And this show is not one where we want people to tell a bunch of secrets or be like, oh, yeah, I saw this person and you wouldn't believe how drunk they were. That's really not what we're about. But I have to ask, because you're in the industry, even if it's not a show or a movie or something that you've worked on, have you heard some ridiculous stories about ego without naming names, like things that people require or request?
Yes. So I obviously, like, so I got my start as a PA. So like at the time, and I was so new to the industry, I really kind of like trauma bonded with like fellow PAs, right? Like it's this, you're in this kind of like shit show thing together, and every show's so different. And luckily I found some really great women at the time who were also PAing and trying to work their way up, have formed really lifelong friendships with. I had a girlfriend of mine who was a PA, and she worked on, at the time, a big competition series. I'm not going to say the name, but I'm sure in a moment we'll gather what it is.
Oh, okay.
Which was all shot on a stage. And they had a handful of talent judges on this show that are very famous. I mean, I have so many stories, but this one, yeah. So anyways, very famous judges. One of them being a famous actress, singer, all the things. And she's so adamant about just anything she wants, right? She's kind of a diva. She's known to be a diva. It's almost like not a surprise when you hear some of her requests and her things, because you're like, of course, this probably comes with it.
Right.
But what struck me about this was that she was constantly late. Big surprise. They're all late all the time. Constantly late, and she would have to be in hair and makeup for 4.5 hours. So her call times were always a lot earlier because she required so much time in hair and makeup. And so then when she would be late, it would extend the day by a solid 3 or 4 hours, which was insane. Not only was that the case, she did not want anyone to see her without makeup.
Oh, gosh.
Or really look at her. It was kind of along the lines of like, don't look at her kind of thing, which we hear a lot about. Don't make eye contact, which we think is fake, but like it exists in this way. Production and the art department had to build a tunnel.
Oh my God.
Makeshift tunnel from where she parked her car to where she got in her trailer, because she did not want anyone to see her without makeup on. And they built a tunnel, and they took an extra 2 days of time, money, network money, all these things to do that. And I was like, there is no way this is safe. I was working on a lot right across, came over, saw the tunnel.
Oh, wow. I hope she was worth it.
I mean, to each their own. I don't know. I do too. I mean, she still works. So, I imagine. I also have another really crazy story, which isn't really within the vein necessarily like a celebrity request story, but I had a friend of mine who I was a PA with on a show. She was the producer's PA at the time, and I was just a production assistant. So producer's PA being just whatever the producers need, production being whatever production needs, right? So the producer's PA, you would imagine, is a bit of a higher position. And the executive, this was back in 2016 maybe, which you think this maybe wouldn't happen in that time, but I digress. Basically, the executive producer asked her to go run a personal errand for him and pick up something for him. It's already been paid. She just needs to go pick it up. And so she leaves set to go do that. A far pickup. I want to say we were at Warner Brothers, and she had to drive all the way to like Encino, like deep in the valley. And it's a pickup from a house. It's in a bag, kind of all bundled up, and she goes and puts it in the trunk. She's driving, and she goes to get gas, and the curiosity's getting the best of her. She's like, probably should look at the package. She goes to look at the package, and it's like not a mountain, it's really dramatic, but like a large amount in a bag of like cocaine, just straight cocaine.
Yeah.
And this is 2016. This isn't that long. Back in, I'm sure in the 80s on set, everything flew, and that people were probably doing it on set. But nonetheless, she went and picked up this package for the executive producer. He sent her from set to go do that, and she looked, and that's what it was.
Does
Crazy
she still have
story.
the address to that house?
Asking for a
I'm
friend.
gonna call her and ask. You know what? I never thought about that, and I'm really glad that.
That's not surprising. I mean, just seeing how some people act, and I know this is bad. I don't know if this is Schadenfreude or what, but I do get a kick out of seeing people that acted that way, and then everyone just got tired of their shit and they just disappeared. So, and I have no idea if this person's it, but we don't see a lot of Cyndi Lauper anymore. There's all kinds of people where it's like, yeah, maybe you just finally pissed everybody off.
Yes. I think people are now getting to that point where you can't get away with as much shitty things, shitty personality, shitty things anymore, which is, it's good. It's great.
Yeah, I work in an industry where I work with a lot of people. And to me, like the greatest thing you can do is make a connection with somebody and build a little trust with them and help them in some way. And you will find more people will love you for that. They will think that you're the greatest thing in the world, and they'll want to work for you. I just can't imagine like treating people like shit.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's kind of fun.
I meant me, Chris. I get it from you. It seems very natural.
I completely agree, though. I think, like, and I've worked underneath showrunners closely, and it's been a really great learning experience for me because I've gotten to work for some great ones, and more so than not, I've gotten to work for some not so great ones. And you really learn and you take away each time, and each time it's like it's not difficult to just be. Yeah, this is so cliche to say, but just kind and helpful and open, and like that's really it. And just like it. I don't know too. And I've also, my biggest thing within this industry too is what I say now to like friends and family is I love to work for a showrunner who loves their life, who loves their family, who loves they have a life outside of this. Now I too love to work, and I love people who really kind of just throw themselves into work. But I also, it's so important that they have people outside of that they look forward to seeing. Otherwise, everything's gonna be shitty. You're gonna be there 24 hours a day.
Right.
They're gonna be in a bad mood. Like it's true, and it sounds like a joke, but it's almost not anymore because I've worked for so many different that I can see it now almost right away. I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna be here 4 hours past because you hate your wife, and that's why
you got to ask ahead of time. Does this person have a hobby? Because if they don't, I'm not working there.
100%. I'm like, no, okay. I'm in the interview. They're like, hey, so do you have any questions for us? I'm like, yeah, a question for you. Are you like, how's your marriage? Are you like, do you have children?
What would your wife and or husband say about you?
Yeah. Can I actually talk to her really quick? Is that fine? I'm also making but I'm also just saying this in like a men's perspective. It's the same with women. I'm like, hey, can I call your husband?
Right.
Are your kids? Do you have a nanny? Like, what's the situation?
I think that'd be frowned upon in the banking industry, but you go ahead and try that.
Okay, you know what? I'll get back to you. I might get fired, but we'll see it.
Right.
So then, knowing all of that, obviously you want to work for the people that you get along with. But is it a case of, hey, a job's a job, so sometimes you have to go work for maybe producers or people that you don't really want to, but it's either that or not working at all? Or is there enough work that you can kind of pick and choose and kind of stay away from the people that you've had bad experiences with?
You got to take those jobs sometimes, and and sometimes the project itself is worth dealing with the shitty people. Depending on, I've got to work on some really cool documentaries that the kind of like the subject itself felt important or really cool or really interesting, knowing that I might know someone on set or one of the executive producers that's like not so fun to be around. And also too, I think a part of that is which, people outside of just the film industry, but just being freelance can relate to, is sometimes you're like, yeah, I hate this, but you got to do this because, bills are coming up, or,
Right,
just
right.
that's what's being freelance. It's none of it is ever, you're not guaranteed any of this work. And so it's flattering, quite honestly, when any job comes up. And there's been times where I've had to take jobs that I know the showrunner or whomever, and I'm like, well, I haven't heard such great things, and or B, I'm not even really crazy about the kind of the subject of the show or whatever that might be. But it's you're kind of building your way in that sense. I can't wait to get to a place where I can say no when I want to say no.
Right.
And as you grow, you get more of that, and that's really nice. And like I've been able to turn down projects in the past that I maybe haven't felt very passionate about, if you will, and or just know it's going to be an absolute shit show. But I still get the occasional one here and there for sure.
So I already asked you about any real jerks, and we kind of got a little bit of that, but I have to ask the question because there's also been people that I've worked with and they've been phenomenal. I actually do work with a charity. I'm on the board of a charity group, and I'll just name this person. I'll name him because he's freaking awesome. We asked for some help from some celebrities because there were some kids that wanted to meet them. That freaking John Cena, I swear to God, I think he canceled his vacation so that he could go and meet these kids. If he was traveling somewhere, he would call us and say, listen, I'm going to be in, wherever. I'm going to be in Florida. Did you have some people that wanted to meet me? And of course, he's freaking John
Wow.
Cena. So we've got a list of 20 kids, and he's like, hey, all right, man, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese's. Let's meet them all.
Oh my God, I
He
love
was
that.
phenomenal with this group I work with. Do you have people that you've worked with that you're okay to name them because they're just freaking awesome?
I was fortunate enough when I was actually still PAing, I was a production assistant for a little while, but there's also, they have PAs for the talent department specifically. So you'll be called like a talent PA, if you will. And you're kind of dedicated to said talent for that time. Now, the interesting part about this position is all these people really have their own personal assistants as is, right? So you're kind of like second personal assistant.
Right.
And I was the talent PA for Drew Barrymore on a show a few years back, this maybe now like 6 years ago. And she seems like an amazing woman, so this isn't that surprising to say, but when I tell you she was an absolute joy, like just, and she had me do a lot for her. I worked a lot, even though she has her team and she has her people. She I find so many cute little things about her that are still like, she's been a celebrity her entire life.
Right.
Since she was a baby. She still loves to read the newspaper, just random little things. She had a really nice high-end sushi chef come to set and gave sushi to everyone on set that day. And that was out of her pocket. That was for the entire production, all the talent department. And we had this fresh sushi chef at the lot. It was really amazing, just giving back. She would get a bunch of PR packages sent to while we were filming. So she gets free makeup. And I would be walking by her trailer and be like, oh my God, look at the package thing. She'd be like, here, have this, this. Just really sweet. And and I was still relatively new to the industry. So it was such a breath of fresh air. And then another person, a big person who I always love to mention, because not necessarily because of how giving they were, but because of their professionalism and their poise and just how sweet they were to everyone. But is RuPaul. I don't know if you guys are familiar with RuPaul.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
RuPaul was one of my favorite people that I've ever really gotten a chance to really work with, because he is just so professional, and he actually gave me one of the best compliments I've ever gotten in my whole entire life. Mostly one for sure because it's coming from him, but I was sitting down writing something and he walked by. He goes, "You have great posture," and then kept walking. And I was like, okay, no one talk to me for the rest of the day. What do you mean? I have the best posture.
You're done.
Don't speak. I'm done. I can go home, I've had the chance to work with some really great showrunners and producers too in general that have just been really I love people who love helping people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're so open, and they are, let me know if you need anything. And I want to, I see XYZ about you, and I want to nurture those things and help you grow, like, in this career. Like, tell me what, just, I really have gotten to meet some incredible people. There's always those stories. I'm like really thrilled to hear that about John Cena, because he's such this like big macho, like,
oh yeah,
like embodiment of this, like, that guy. So I love to hear that.
He's an absolute sweetheart, and he has made it very clear, if you need anything from me, let me know.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible. Also so cool that you guys get to work with like with a charity in that sense. I love that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like most of your experience has been with television. Is there any aspirations to go to movies, or do you think maybe TV is where it's at for you?
I want to do all of it. I definitely do want to do movies. I haven't had an opportunity yet to. I've like been on like friends' film sets, but not in like a producing aspect on my own. I'm actually in the middle of like writing my first film script myself, and so I do really have aspirations. But I don't want to say that like I don't also want to do TV. I would like, my most ideal is to do both, because television is, you work longer, which is great because it takes longer to film, but also, it's cool to do episodic in that sense. But yeah, I really would love to do film.
Well, as you're writing the script, make sure you write a part for some podcasters. We can help you out with that.
No, and there's now podcasting isn't everything. So I'm like, I was just watching something on some scripted show on HBO the other day, and like there was a whole scene between like a podcast episode. I was like, wow, this is amazing. It's like we're watching a podcast within a show.
Oh yeah, I think there's a saying that I think most men over the age of 40 will have a podcast in the next 10 years. I mean, it's like all of them will have something. I know a lot of people have podcasts.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's fun though, and I'm with you. I agree as far as, the kind of people you want to work with, those genuine people. And since you brought up Drew Barrymore, we've all grown up with that woman. I mean, we've known her since E.T. She was probably in commercials before that. Wasn't she the original fire starter too?
She was.
No, yes,
yeah.
Yes. And you know what the really interesting thing about her career is that you guys grew up with her, and I'm assuming, don't want to assume, but I'm assuming you're in a bit of a different generation than I am. And then also I feel like I grew up with her. You know what I mean? And I just stayed working. So I feel like I know her really well. My parents feel like they know her well. So when I was working with her, this is more of a deep cut, and my parents were more familiar with his work than I was, and I had to do a little bit of research. But one of my very first like personal assisting jobs in the industry, which was when I was in between gigs at the moment, because I was just starting out to freelance, was I was a personal assistant for like a little while for Peter Bogdanovich.
Okay.
Which was, if you like film, him, like that's film noir, that's like older, deep cut director, which that was like and he was super cool, and being around just that film, and I got to like assist at this film festival that he was being honored at, which definitely felt more within like movies and cinema and like film. And that was really cool to kind of be around a little bit of that older film generation in that sense.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I love the stories. I listen to multiple podcasts, especially if it's anybody telling stories about how they used to work. And Adam Carolla has always been one of my favorite podcasters. And it's so funny because he always used to bitch about Sid and Marty Krofft. Do you know who they are?
No, I don't think I do.
Well, it might be just out of your age group for sure. These guys used to make cartoons, and they were cartoons that played in like the late 60s and early 70s, and they were freaking awful. They were, they were some of the worst hackish cartoons. But back then, you had 3 options to watch TV. So you had this horrible show called Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. It was just like somebody smoked too much pot, and they were like, hey, let's just write this down, and the kids will just watch it because they don't have any options. So Adam Carolla is constantly bitching about Sid and Marty Krofft and what hacks they are. And then one day he finds out that I think it was Marty Krofft is still alive. He's like 96 years old, and he wanted to be on the show. So a couple months ago, this guy gets on the show, and he is absolutely the most lucid human being you've ever heard. And he's got stories, and he knows everybody. And it was just so funny, him talking about, yeah, Frank Sinatra used to get pissed at me for making a puppet that looked like him. And we were like, I couldn't believe the stories he was telling. But one of the things that he said was all the stuntmen that would work around Paul Newman, they all loved him because Paul would show up and he didn't like to be like the really fancy, I'm a big superstar. He just wanted to hang out with the guys. And so after work, he would open up the trunk of his car and it had an open bar, and he had everybody who was like production people and stunt people come over and they would just drink all night. I thought that was the coolest story ever.
Oh my God, that's incredible. I love, and that's the thing too, is like, we all hear stories, you know, being in the industry and working behind the camera about, you know, like everyone's interested in talent and like hearing those stories because they're fascinating, and you kind of, you know, you never know what you're going to get. And it's always like, you always hear the story of like I've heard, like, for example, from people that I know in the industry, like George Clooney will like hang with the grips, and you know what I mean? It's like, and those things and those stories that you hear that like, sometimes people are very separated, or you hear the horror stories about like, so-and-so, doesn't want anyone to look them in the eyes when walking to set. I have, my boyfriend's an actor, and fun actor story. This is like a very actor thing, but the kind of a way to tell that an actor may be a little bit of an asshole or kind of a diva in this sense is, depending on, like, he might have a scene, let's just say, for example, with, I don't want to use an actual name because he might like work with, he might have a scene with Joe, for example, right? And Joe's a really big famous actor.
Right.
And they'll be having a conversation in the scene, right? And they'll be doing my boyfriend's coverage. So the camera will be on him and he'll be speaking to Joe. But Joe's not on camera at the moment because the camera's on him, right? But he might need him there to you know, utilize him for that energy, or if they're having a heated conversation, he wants to look at him in the eyes and see him so he can pull from all of that, right? Some big actors they'll have a stand-in go in for that position. Now, they're given the option to do that, but it's kind of a fucked up thing because it's like, I don't want to look at your stand-in when I'm delivering this line. I want to look at you. I want to, like, we need the chemistry. I need to be pissed off at you. So it's kind of a dick move if, like, oftentimes actors will have a stand-in, and he's told me some stories about some people, and you're like, oh, damn, that sucks. Like, I want them to, you know, like, I hate to hear that, but it doesn't happen, you know, and you would be like, I don't know, Tom Cruise might do that, but then the biggest names sometimes will always be there and won't have a stand-in. So that's also, like, cool to hear that as well. It's like, okay, they're still there for the work. You know what I mean? Like, they're still there to just make the project the best that it can.
Well, let's face it, Tom Cruise is probably his own production assistant and his own stunt man. He's probably a little busy. But, what's the real investment there? If you are interested and if you are invested in this project, how long's that scene going to be to shoot that? I mean, 20 minutes, if that?
Exactly. And all of that, like you said, it's like, you know, I imagine everyone wants the project to turn out truly as best as it can. And from an actor's perspective, like, you do need that you need the person, you know, whatever scene it might be. It could be a romantic scene. It could be just a normal, it's like, it doesn't, it's a real kind of dick move. And people get to the certain place in their career that people allow them to do it and they have the option. Like, you know, come on, like, you're helping out an actor who's not as big as you. You know what I'm saying? Like, or someone who's maybe still on the up and up and learning and figuring that out. And so to not be there, you know.
Right. Some people just don't have time for those little people.
Exactly. Fuck them. It's all good.
Right. Well, hey, Sarah, thank you very much for talking with us today. This is the point in the podcast where I usually ask Chris, what did we learn today?
Yeah, you know, I think I learned that I need to make friends with Drew Barrymore.
That is so funny because I actually learned that I had one more reason to love Drew Barrymore. So I guess we're on the simpatico here. Yeah, very good.
Love that. Honestly, as much like good press as I can give that woman, by all means.
Outstanding. Well, again, thank you very much, Sarah. And this is Scott McLaughlin.
And this is Chris Kiernan
saying, we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.